Warm greetings, Code Monkeys and fellow VEDSies, and welcome back to CodedLockFilms. Today I'm going to tell you another story about my RPG experiences, and this is a tale that has come to be known amongst my friends as Donved used tackle. So in order to tell this story, I first have to explain a couple of the characters involved in it. And once again, I am not sure if I have permission to use these people's real names on the internet, so I will be making up fake names. There are 3 players that are of particular relevance to this story. 2 of them are my friends who we shall call Jack and Conrad. In this game, which I was DMing, the 2 of them were playing a pair of mercenaries who were basically BFFs. Conrad was playing a half-orc barbarian known as Gorn the Claymore, and Jack was playing a human fighter known as Donved of the Lance. These 2 were career mercenaries who were on the run from their old boss. Basically, within their backstory, what had happened is that their boss had grown more and more corrupt over the years, and one day they refused to work for this guy any longer. But because he had become a very powerful crime boss in that time, they pretty much had to skip town. In fact, they left the continent entirely. So Donved of the Lance and Gorn the Claymore were basically like this. And the next character you have to understand is a wizard who went by the name of Cyrus. He was played by my friend who we shall refer to as Dan. Cyrus's backstory was that he was an escaped slave. He was one of these many slaves that was owned by a very powerful archmage, and he knew he was going to want to escape, so what he did was that whenever he was sent in to clean his master's study, he would just take a random book about magic off the shelf and just kind of read through it for a few minutes. And over many years, he taught himself how to use magic, and eventually he escaped. And on the way out, he stole from his master's study a robe, a couple of little magical trinkets, I think a few potions and scrolls. I think there was one wand that he stole, and I'm sorry, I love this. He stole his master's favorite pair of pants. But here's the funny thing about being enslaved by an archmage. Archmages are powerful people. And the archmage actually hired several mercenaries to try to track down Cyrus and kill him, or preferably bring him in alive so he could be taught some manners first. And one of the people he hired was a mercenary known as the Becomer. In the game I was running, the Becomer is basically one of the most elite mercenaries in the world, because the Becomer is a creature that is known as a doppelganger. A doppelganger is essentially what you or I would call a changeling, but it is not specifically a changeling because changelings are actually separate things in D&D. But what you think of when you think of a changeling, that's a doppelganger. One of the things that Cyrus liked to do was experiment with alchemy, and the Becomer spent a lot of time in a bunch of different bodies observing Cyrus from a small distance, and was able to kind of figure out what his personality was, where the places he generally liked to hang out were, and most importantly, what his interests were. So the Becomer then took the form of this woman named Dana. Dana was a girl who sold a bunch of rare herbs out of a cart in the marketplace, some of which were very useful to an alchemist. You see where I'm going with this? So there was one point in the campaign where they had all gone to the marketplace to look for clues. I can't actually remember what the clues were about at the moment because there was a lot of different things going on in this campaign. And then Jesse's camera battery died, but we're back now. So they actually split up to go look around the marketplace, which in RPGs is a big no-no. One of the phrases you will hear most often in relations to RPGs is, "Don't split the party!" And you really shouldn't. You just, it's not the best idea. Gorn and Donved were off on their own trying to beat some answers out of people. The rogue who was named Cindy was off doing her own thing, because you know rogues, they like to operate alone. And the third group was Cyrus and Remy. Remy was a druid, for the record. While they were in the marketplace, they figured, well, might as well pick up some alchemical reagents while we're here, so they went to Dana's cart. So what I had Dana do in order to separate Cyrus from Remy, and I'm actually really proud of this, Cyrus wanted a lot of stuff, and so what Dana said was that she was actually out of most of her larger containers, but if you wouldn't mind coming with me to this nearby alchemy shop, then I can pick up some more containers. And Remy, if you wouldn't mind just staying here and guarding my cart to make sure nobody robs it in our absence, that would be just delightful. And they fell for this ploy, hook, line, and sinker. Gorn and Donved actually had Cyrus's familiar with them. So basically, Cyrus gets knocked out cold with one blow to the back of the head, and halfway across town, his raven just perks up and says, "Oh shit," and they book it to the alchemy shop, but Cyrus is gone. The Becomer had actually paid off the owner of the alchemy shop to look the other way while all this was happening. So they quickly beat some answers out of the owner of this alchemy shop, and they find out that Cyrus has been taken down to the docks because the Becomer is planning to have him shipped back to his homeland and thusly back to his master. And they manage to find the crate that Cyrus is in, and they free him, but then the Becomer shows up. Now, the way that I had statted this enemy, the Becomer could have easily taken this group down, but Cyrus might have died in the crossfire, and and this Archmage is paying a lot more if Cyrus is brought back alive. So what I was planning on was essentially having the Becomer trounce them and toy with them a little bit, and then make a quick escape to come back and kidnap another day. But that did not end up happening. Everyone rolls for their initiative, and the first one who gets to attack is Donved. And here is where things got funny. Donved's logic was basically, well, this person wants to kidnap and possibly kill Cyrus, so I need to get her away from Cyrus because Cyrus is a squishy wizard. For those of you who may not be familiar with that term, when a character in an RPG has very low hit points, that character is generally referred to colloquially as being squishy. Now, as I said, the Becomer was a pretty competent foe, but something that Donved was really good at was charging and bull rushing. Because he's a dude who fights with a lance, of course he'd be good at charging, right? So he was going to try to bull rush the Becomer to get him/her as far away from Cyrus as humanly possible. Now, the Becomer actually had pretty good defensive stats, but there was one thing that you can never count on, and that was the fact that on this bull rush attempt, Jack rolled a nat 20. Because a nat 20 is an automatic success, and what's more, a nat 20 is often a very good success. So when you bull rush someone, basically what you do is slam into them bodily and try to push them back. But remember, this fight was taking place on the docks, so he actually succeeded so well that he managed to push the Becomer all the way off the docks and into the harbor below. I gave Donved a reflex save to try and catch himself or stop himself or whatever before he went over the edge with the Becomer, which he failed miserably. So now Donved is in the water with the Becomer. Armor has several stats associated with it, but the two that we're going to talk about are armor bonus and armor check penalty. These are both fairly straightforward. The armor bonus is however much protection the armor provides. Up here on the table, you will find fairly low armor bonuses, pretty light armor like leather and stuff like that, and then as you go farther down the list, the armors start to get heavier, but they offer more protection. But the more protection armor gives you, the harder it is to move around in it. It's a lot easier to move around in something like leather than it is to move around in something like chainmail, for instance. And the difficulty of doing that is known as an armor check penalty, which gives you a penalty to certain physical skills. Skills like climb, acrobatics, stealth, and most importantly, swim. The Becomer was wearing leather armor, which is all the way up here with an armor check penalty of 0. Donved of the Lance, however, was wearing full plate, which is all the way down here with an armor check penalty of 6. Turns out, not that easy to swim in full plate armor. So Donved, after this beastly tackle at this really cool moment, immediately starts to sink like a stone. The Becomer wriggles out of his grip and swims away, and Gorn the Claymore has to dive in to rescue his friend from drowning. It was so ridiculous. And really, this is one of those moments that taught me the most fundamental principle of boss fights in D&D. No matter how much planning you do as a DM, boss fights never go the way you plan them. Because there will always be that one player who does something that you could not possibly have predicted they would do. And in this case, it was Donved used tackle. It's super effective! So that is that story. If you would like to see a couple of my previous RPG stories, I have provided links here and in the video description. And if you want to hear some even better RPG stories, make sure to check out the Spoonie Experiment, where you can find a series known as Counter Monkey, which is Noah Antweiler, the Spoonie one, telling stories of his RPG experiences from the past, much like I have done here today. So until next time, Code Monkeys and fellow VEDSies, I will see you tomorrow.